Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's CC-Webinar.live keynote and panel discussion session. And thank you for joining. We would like to also thank Digitalk for sponsoring today's CC-Webinar.live session. Now, I would like to pass on the microphone to Eric to introduce our keynote speakers and moderate the session. For audience, if you have any questions to our keynote speaker or panelists, please do use a chat box option throughout this session. That's all from my side. Now over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Aurelia, and welcome to the world. Welcome to all of you out there, and happy to see you again, or to listen to you again. Today we're going to discuss why real time isn't real enough. Introducing real time from Digitalk. I will not do it by myself, as you're acquainted to, and I'm happy to say that I have Neil French and David Ellert here with me today. So David, please take a minute and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm David Ellard. I'm a product specialist with Digitalk. I've been working with Digitalk for the best part of 20 years in a number of different products, and I'm looking forward to speaking to all of you today on this subject of why real time isn't real enough for you.
Thank you so much, David. Neil, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Neil French. I've been with Digitalk since around 1999 and are responsible for the cloud strategy here at Digitalk, and have led Digitalk from predominantly on-premise technology through to our current cloud strategy and the future.
Thank you, Neil, and David and Neil. Welcome to this panel session. So, for you out there, what does real time mean for your wholesale voice business? Well, the term has been for decades in our industry, but it's time to rethink it and understand what we call real time, because it really isn't. In the wholesale voice market, true real time gives you an edge and helps you protect your business from fraud. In this webinar, we will introduce the concept of true real time for voice wholesale, and show this can be enabled from an agile, secure cloud environment. Today, product specialist David Ellard will guide you through the limitations of the existing landscape and showcase the opportunities true real time brings to your business. So today he will show you how to eliminate the risks, benefit from secure voice firewalls, support initiative variability in your routing, make the best of every call in every moment, and optimize commercial arrangements. I'm happy to invite David Ellard to the stand and to share with us his keynote presentation. So David, you're gonna tell us everything we need to know, right?
I'm certainly going to try, Eric. Let me share my screen now, yes?
Thank you. Please do, please. And take it away. Thank you.
Sharing that PowerPoint. Can everybody see that okay? Eric, can you just confirm?
Yeah, I see.
Fantastic. Okay. So hello, everybody. My name, as we've said, is David. I'm the Carrier Cloud Product Specialist here at Digitalk. And as Eric has been introducing, we're going to talk to you in the next 30 minutes or so about what dynamic real-time means and how it differs from what is commonly accepted as real-time in telecommunications today. And of course, what that means for you and your business, how it will save you money, protect you from fraud, improve efficiency of your operation, all without any downside. A note before I begin, at the end, we are going to have some time to answer questions in a round table panel discussion moderated by our friend Eric here. So as we go through, if you do have any questions, as we've said, throw them in the chat and we'll gather them up there and answer them at the end. But to get started, I want to take you back into the past for a moment to set the scene about where we come from, so we can talk about where we are now and where we should be moving to in the future. So let me start by defining our purpose as operators. At a high level, the goal of telecommunication networks and management systems is to connect calls using the most operationally and commercially efficient routes that we can. We achieve this by gathering KPIs and other data for analysis of session requirements so that our routing and rating decisions can be made on the best quality information available. Now, in the past, and to be honest, for some organizations still working with legacy infrastructure today, in the present, the reality was this key decision-making data was full of delays. It was anything but real time. Our legacy in telecoms is that this data gathering and analysis was a manual daily process. We know how it works. CDRs gathered from switches into back-end databases, being processed, analyzed to produce destination and performance reports, trend analysis, margin data, the other information we need to make these day-to-day operational decisions we all make. This information was then manually fed back into routing plans, which were downloaded back into the switches for the next day's routing. And every single step of this process added long delays. And what did that mean? Well, it meant, of course, that data used to make business decisions was always going to be out of date, that it wasn't fit for business functionally. It means that, for example, any kind of meaningful credit control is impossible. Liability protection goes out of the window with non-existent credit limits, as does any ability to provide margin protection or accurate spend limits. It means that fraud becomes a huge danger. The GLF, the Global Leaders Forum, recently published a document on fraud, reporting that it costs our industry 17 billion every year and that speed of response is vital. Now, we're going to come back to that later, but basically, we all have to understand this legacy model exposes our business to unacceptable risks. That's why we moved on. On an operational level, it means routing decisions and QoS will be out of date based on data from the distant past. It means when routing changes need to be made quickly, these are driven by engineering necessity, the knock, likely reducing margin and ultimately profitability. And of course, in this model, access to data and key performance indicators falls far beyond what's needed. I'm personally aware of a large international mobile organization still running a solution that means that teams making platform-wide commercial decisions receive data and KPIs monthly. It means they're going into the virtual trading floor in international wholesale markets blindfolded. I mean, imagine trading stocks or commodities or anything else with data a month out of date. We know when we think about the stock market how voracious it is, demanding of data updates by the second. But haven't we moved past this? Well, while some legacy platforms still operate in this manner, for many, the systems of very long delays is in the past. We know now that there are a good number of providers who talk confidently about working in real time, and perhaps that solves these issues. Maybe, but maybe not. And that's really the crux of what I'm here to talk to you about today. Firstly, I need to be clear on what we mean by real time here. It's a term that gets used a lot, so let's take a moment to understand the process of it. If we can look at the call flow on the screen, we see that initially we receive a call from our origination partner. That call passes through a series of steps on the switching platform, validating and making a service decision before being routed out and connected to our termination partner. That connected call then progresses for seconds, minutes before eventually completing. The moment that that call is completed, a call record is immediately and automatically written from the switching device into a data management device, a database, which means a CDR is then straight away accessible to operational and business support systems, potentially triggering further automated behaviors in credit control, alerting, and routing. Plus, the data is available for manual interrogation through reporting systems. This means that our data is available in a very short period of time after the call is completed. That's what gets called real time. But here's the thing. Take a moment to think where in our timeline the key decision points occur. Where can we take consideration of credit control and other revenue assurance functions, margin, bilateral enforcement? Where can we consider routing factors and capacity management? We can only react to these as calls are set up, using the information from our admittedly swiftly available completed calls. And while that might sound pretty real time, we access data within seconds of call completion, yes. And people certainly use the term real time to refer to this process. It isn't really real time. It isn't. Look again at the diagram. Everything we are seeing is occurring after the event has taken place, after the call has completed. What this inverted commas real-time model means is that the points we've talked about as being problematic in the legacy model are still there. We may have automated processes shortening the delay that it takes to get the information we need, but fundamentally, we are still looking at data after the event to which it pertains has completed. As we see on the screen, the commercial functions take place after call completion. Therefore, the information we use for rating, routing, commercial management of the platform is out of date. It means we can still pass problematic and fraudulent calls because we aren't looking for them until they have completed. Fundamentally, it means that you are always looking to the past when it comes to making your decision about the calls arriving in the now. And I want to argue to you, ladies and gentlemen, this methodology still isn't fit for your business. And let me illustrate that by talking to you about making routing decisions to start with, something we're all familiar with. Because with routing, we can see restrictions imposed by this after-event real-time paradigm clearly. There are certainly negative connotations with commercial practices, but routing has exactly the same set of problems as that really old legacy system. We still have large static tables, matrices of routing destinations. And while branching options may give the impression of dynamism, fundamentally the decisions taken to determine routing are occurring on events that happened in the past. What's more, the pressures of staying competitive and profitable in today's market are adding more and more dimensions to these routing tables. Where once destination and price might have been sufficient, now organizations wanting to take control of profitability are incorporating more considerations into their routing. Commercially enforceable quality targets, bilateral agreements, a desire to blend in high risk, higher margin carriers as and when it makes sense. Couple this with the challenges of origination routing, and we can see that these static matrices are facing the problem of exponential growth while running on traditional non-exponential data technologies. I want to argue that getting stuck reacting to what has happened is not good enough. We need to think about how to get ahead of the curve, how to really work in real time. Take a moment to think back to me mentioning the market earlier. Every trader learns this mantra I have on screen on day one. Indeed, it's written into the small print every time we make an investment or take out a fund. But in telecommunications, it's simply become accepted that past performance, this not really real time, is the only measure that we use to anticipate the future. And we're arguing that that's simply not good enough. So for a moment, let's step outside the box. Go a bit blue sky and take a moment to think in wider terms. What is it a carrier needs in the market today to disrupt, to grow market share, to be successful? Let's lay out some fundamental needs for three key business areas on the screen here. In that hot potato topic of risk management, we need to be able to consider every single call, even in a wholesale network, and evaluate it for risk, for fraud, before we route it. When it comes to routing, we need to be able to deal comfortably with the evolving demands of next generation routing, considerations brought around by legislation changes, supporting origination needs in Europe, the Middle East, providing flexibility for stir shaken coming in soon in North America. But more, we need to move away from creaking models that struggle to deliver when these changes come, to modalities that support infinite, ever multiplying routing dimensionality. We need the flexibility to route every single call in the most profitable and beneficial way possible in that moment, not based on the past. And with our business systems, we need to ensure the accessibility of data, our KPIs, to the people who need them, whenever they need them, and wherever they need them. Even more than that, though, we need to ensure that it's always, fundamentally always, commercial needs of our business that drive the decision making and innovation, and we're not being hamstrung by technical limitations. What do we need to achieve this? Well, let's bring our call timeline back on the screen and think about where, in a perfect world, we need these decision points to be. At a high level, our goal must be for every decision to be made with a global understanding of business targets. The system that processes our traffic needs to be aware of the commercial factors facing the business. All routing decisions must be based on these commercial goals. But as we saw previously with the after event model, that simply isn't possible. To achieve real time, your switching platform has to be aware of what is happening with the other calls on the platform at setup and as our calls are in progress. It has to look more like this, what I've drawn on the board here, where each of the key decision points is made with real-time information at the relevant point in the call flow. This is where we need to get to. Now, of course, it's fair to ask, is that really possible in wholesale? How can a platform's decisions be informed by calls that are still in the setup phase? Surely there are too many calls to process in this model. But here, if I may, we have a problem of perspective. We are so used to thinking within the frame of this after event model that it's difficult to even consider another option. We need a paradigm shift. By adopting newer technologies, virtualization, machine learning, by working in a cloud environment that allows us to leverage the next generation of architectural solutions that are simply unavailable to organizations working on the scale of a single business, we can bring about a core routing engine that seamlessly, dynamically processes more and more of these commercialized decision points that were previously associated with back-end post-event processing into the switching path, as we are showing above. This means that even while we are processing calls at extremely high volumes, an intelligent virtualized next generation call routing engine can interrogate each and every one. We can ask questions both as the call is being processed by the network and during the call being run through our platform. Questions such as, are the signs of a fraudulent call occurring? What is the optimal way to route this call at this moment? What quality is required and what's the best route to obtain this? What decisions meet our commercial goals, margin thresholds, agreements, contract pricing, so on? Are conversational media packets being lost on this call? Let's know that during the call. And has the call been dropped by the network rather than by the end user? This real-time methodology we're talking about allows a proactive, agile approach to these key aspects of managing your network. So, with this in mind, let's move towards a finish by expanding on some of the direct benefits that this methodology I'm talking about delivers, starting again with routing. A fundamental difference that implementing real-time technology will bring to your network is this paradigm shift in the way we think about routing. Let's briefly remind ourselves of that after-event model I was talking about, the not really real-time routing. In this system, static tables of data are created, calls are routed, the results of the calls are evaluated, the results of the evaluation are fed back in to create new fixed routing tables, and the process begins again. We have an open loop. There is a gap requiring intervention, the man or the person there on the screen, between CDRs being written and the creation of these inflexible routing tables. However, although this concept is dominant, it's actually not the only way, and it's certainly not the best way. There is an alternative. Real-time offers the ability to close that loop, to genuinely route dynamically. This model takes us away from the need for ever-growing sets of unmanageable static routes. Instead, routing decisions can be made in the moment, based on the rules and principles laid down by a routing team. Does this call from this origination to this particular destination at this moment in time require a specific quality metric? Then we will route it so that this all is met. But the very action of routing that call, the fact that that call is now in progress, has changed the status of the platform. And that will now be taken into account when evaluating the routing choices for the next call that is presented. As trading conditions evolve, as quality and commercial factors change, this will seamlessly be fed back into the core routing engine, and it will be able to make the most appropriate routing decisions at the moment in time. You don't lose anything, but real-time gains you genuine dynamic routing, and it means that every call can be optimized for quality and profitability. But it's more than just routing. This functionality also helps us de-risking our business, helps us with fraud. This real-time technology means we can position a platform as a core routing engine at the center of your decision-making processes. As well as providing the commercial and operational advantages we talked about, it will function as a genuine voice firewall, preventing fraudulent attacks before they even begin to take hold. A recent white paper I'm showing on the screen, the note here from the Global Leaders Forum, reported carriers were proud to report that they were now able to identify and tackle fraud 3 hours after it occurred on average. 3 hours. Let that sink in for a moment and think about how much money you could lose within 3 hours of fraudulent traffic to a high-value destination. That same paper states that fraud costs the industry $17 billion every year, and that speed of response is vital. But again, the paradigm is wrong. Thinking about fixing it after the event is wrong. Fundamentally, with real time, we have the ability to recognize fraud in progress and either stop it from entering the network or strip it from within the network. We do not want to be receiving reports hours after the fraudulent attack has begun. This should never be acceptable. We need to acknowledge that, of course, fraud is everyone's problem. And it's the duty of every vendor and every operator to take on the challenge of reducing it as much as possible. That's something all of telecoms needs to be doing today. From the point of view of those of us in the central transit aspects of the network, thankfully, self-interest matches with duty, as fundamentally we ensure that for us, our customers, our suppliers, we only route the traffic that we want to route and that we're going to get paid for. With digital real time, where stir shaken is enforced, the CRE can take advantage of that identity information provided and include that in the routing decision. But that support isn't there yet for international traffic. And of course, we all understand it's extremely difficult to look at a single call and determine it's fraudulent. However, while it's certainly true that normal measures of quality, ASR, ACD, etc., are much less useful in the micro-time environment, the combination of real-time control that we've been talking about with machine learning tech, and most importantly, the continuous evaluation and assessment of live traffic, create this voice firewall. Algorithms are trained. It's the training that's key with the patterns of calls. They learn the timings and variability of the different messaging, and in doing so, they can identify likely fraud in real time. Couple this with destination and source data that we hold within the platform to increase accuracy, this raft of features comes together not only to provide recommendations on blocking future calls, but also so that deliberate decisions can be taken in real time to reject calls before they connect and cost you. Additionally, not only can you be protected from handling fraudulent calls as they occur, but these calls can be leveraged as services to your customers, providing them with reduced risk and you with additional revenue. The protection of the voice firewall provides another benefit in de-risking your business and upping profitability in relation to safely onboarding new specialist suppliers, taking advantage of niche market opportunities. Early adopters with specialist knowledge of high-value, high-risk destinations can prove lucrative to connect with. But the risks of such potential partners cannot be underestimated. Real-time rating, destination monitoring, and credit control come together to ensure that you can connect with these nimble organizations to take advantage of commercial opportunities with zero liability that your competitors can't. And because credit may be difficult for these organizations to come by, the platform even offers the tools you need to facilitate flexible payment cycles between larger and challenger operators. Now, if this credit flexibility is something that's of interest to you, I don't want to get into it now. It's not the subject of today, but it's something we've written on extensively at Digitalk. I was involved in this, and I would invite you to check out our white paper library on the website for more information, or chat to me offline and I'll talk more about that. But bringing ourselves a little bit to the close, while we haven't reached the end of the benefits of this technology, we could talk about advantages for account managers, management information, further automation. And again, I'm delighted to do that with you offline. I am reaching the end of my time today, and I don't want to keep you here forever. So what does this real-time system look like, and how can you leverage its benefits? Well, of course, all the benefits we've been discussing are fully realized within the framework of the Digitalk Carrier Cloud. And we've achieved this by integrating core routing functions and virtualized network functions together, single provisioning within a cloud environment, where a customer base of many hundreds allows us to leverage cutting-edge macro networking and big data technologies. We provide deployments in our public cloud, where organizations can refactor their businesses by migrating to a full platform as a service solution, or for larger multi-site deployments, or where you need to meet local regulatory requirements. We provide all of these tools and their benefits as private cloud too. And we understand that for some organizations with significant legacy expenditure on on-premises equipment, immediate migration may not be possible or desirable. In these circumstances, the platform can be deployed purely as a centralized core routing engine that sits at the center of legacy networks to give you the benefit of these real-time tools while offering a gradual migration path to the cloud. So at Digitalk, we've been around for 25 years. And as I said, I've been around for most of those, 18 years I found out recently, not quite as long as Neil, but almost there. And of course, that makes us experienced. And you can see on the screen some of the many wider reasons why working with Digitalk offers commercial and technical sense. But such a key part of that experience is still knowing and understanding that innovation continues to be key to this marketplace. Standing still is falling behind. So with that in mind, my final takeaway for you today is to suggest that being the operator who continues with historical routing approaches while your customers, partners, rivals are evolving to use more real-time tools, decision-making processes, more flexibility, is a recipe for slow decline. As always, our industry is changing and evolving, and we at Digitalk look forward to helping you keep ahead of that curve. With that in mind, I'm just going to say, from my perspective, we'd love to hook up with you on social media. I popped up our LinkedIn addresses on screen, or check out our website. But that's sort of me done. As I said, I've been David, and I think it's time for me to hand you back over to Eric's safe pair of hands, and we can carry on with the rest of the session.
Thank you very much, David, and
Thanks, David.
thank you for sharing this this insight on Real from Digitalk. And quick question: how can Real actually from Digitalk actually optimize the commercial agreements of operators? You tipped on it quickly, but
absolutely. It's a subject with a number of aspects, and we were focusing more on some of the other bits here today. But in terms of kind of aspects like your agreement monitoring, when you're working with bilateral agreements, when you're working real time, once more, we can leverage these technologies to give the people, your account managers or whoever else is working on these aspects, the data they need at the moment they need it. So rather than hanging about with information that comes days later, weeks later, months later, you're getting that information at the very moment you need it, or even advance of when your partners are. So again, in this trading floor perspective, you've got all the information you need to kind of go into the trading floor with everything that's there ready to make the best deals you possibly can. It's all about accessibility of the data in this kind of MIS area.
I think also it's a matter of, I think what David kind of touched on was this kind of, as the number of matrices that drive your routing increases, then effectively you can exceed the capabilities of things actually doing that underlying switching. And one of the things with agreements is that they're kind of counterintuitive when you look at the model of them, that a lot of the times you're kind of almost agreeing a higher rate for a return higher rate. And what this can do if your systems are kind of effectively munging data and then trying to export all of this as routing information that a basic switching platform can understand, that you lose the nuances in that. And when you're trying to entirely route or route, for our American friends, on profitability, then that can trigger false alarms. So if your system isn't capable of understanding the nuances of how agreements work, then it's very difficult to kind of reflect that in your kind of profitability model when you're exporting that routing. But also, as David says, it's very much about planning and having those tools to plan. And I think it's about providing the kind of the OSS and the BSS elements that bring that together, that let you take a kind of deep dive into the data, do these kind of what if analysis, plug in some numbers, find something that works, but then importantly, track that. Because again, that relationship is often counterintuitive. You need to know when you're reaching fulfillment so that you can seek other routes or automatically kind of turn those routes off to limit your exposure on them. So it's about tracking those as well as planning and executing them. It's understanding whether they're keeping up their end of the bargain, and when, if it's worked for you, then when you need to start extending that agreement. So it's a very complex area that needs specific implementation, both in the telephony and the back office elements.
Certainly something I've seen working with some of our customers who've migrated onto us is the benefits they get from having the integration of the rating, the agreements, the routing all in one system, so that these can feed into each other. So it becomes much more dynamic. You can get the information that something's about to happen and make these changes, rather than with an agreement, if you run over by a few hours, that could end up being quite costly. Not fraudulent costly, but you can make the most of these commercial decisions.
But isn't it also true, gentlemen, that and I'm happy that Neil joined our discussion already, and thank you for your answer, Neil. But optimizing your commercial agreements and arrangement, I mean, to me, you do this with a partner, and to be a good partner, it has also a quality aspect to it, because once you let's say can alert. You have the visibility of this is fraudulent traffic. You can immediately alert your the operator who is sending you this traffic. So for this, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. And you'll be, let's say, you show that you're a good partner, and maybe he didn't see it, and he's, because of using the reel from Digitalk, he is quickly alerted as well, and will not face as much as fraud as well. Is that true?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. I mean, it's, fraud is everyone's responsibility, isn't it? But as David said, selfishly, you want to make sure you pay for every minute that you take. But equally, that on a healthy relationship, that is a proactive discussion that you have with your partners. That, hey, you're sending us this profile of traffic. Do you know about it initially? Take that kind of softly approach. Do you know about this traffic? If they don't, they can start rejecting it upstream. But yeah, ultimately, even if it's, if you take the healthy relationship aside, nobody likes disputes. And, the minute there's traffic, whether you were able to act on it or not, I think the minute there's any possibility for traffic to be disputed, it's better to just deal with it there in the now than wait for billing day to occur and the inevitable dispute to come in that needs to be agreed and settled.
Yeah, and to be happily surprised, not. Right?
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, that is that, again, one of the benefits that I've heard from our customers is using this real-time tech has allowed them to allow some of their smaller niche customers who are coming in who don't have this level of technology to be more secure. I mentioned this just in passing in the presentation, and it comes from some real examples where, in effect, our customer using the Digital Carrier Cloud platform are making their customers stickier with them, because their customers are feeling more secure, because they've been using 24-hour credit limits to make sure that they don't spike in traffic suddenly. And this is a real-time function. They've been using these credit controls not just to protect their own platform, but to protect the customer in a way they can't do themselves, because they're a little bit of a smaller player. So by using this tech, you can encourage and keep the relationships and keep people sending traffic to you that you can make money on, rather than going elsewhere because perhaps there's a millionth of a fraction of a cent somewhere else, but you've shown that you can look after them, kind of thing.
And I think that's an important distinction, that, you know, our technology is actually rate aware. So when we're talking about this, we're talking that the session control layer is actually understanding the commercial model. It knows what you're buying at, it's knowing what you're selling at, which is how we can kind of route at margin level, but also it's able to track trend on expenditure. So while, you know, sometimes you've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake in terms of overall exposure, what you really need to do, especially with larger operators where you may be on, say, 30 and 30 sometimes billing, is to understand when that expenditure starts to run away. And it's the most granular mechanism that you've got of controlling controlling your revenue assurance, is to just understand if there's a runaway expenditure, you know, alert immediately, but also potentially automate it so that that profile of traffic is disabled because it's a higher risk profile. So when you see that expenditure run away in real time, the SBC is starting to kind of turn off some traffic but keep other traffic running.
So Neil, cool, all fine. But a lot of people out there would say, duh, we know this, of course, this is not. But if it is so obvious, huh? So why is the wholesale voice market still not 100% protected then?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things. I mean, probably the two major things are technology and culture. And I think those go in equal proportions. I mean, many networks we know aren't architected to support real-time services. You know, you're working with legacy switching infrastructure that's working on very much a kind of if-then approach to kind of authenticating and routing on sessions. But I think when you look at it in terms of fraud control and revenue assurance, I think culturally there's a fear of rejecting legitimate traffic that's driven by commercial teams who are looking, you know, who are really focusing on broad quality targets. And if you start rejecting too much fraudulent traffic, is it really fraudulent? They're worried about that, but also, will it affect the underlying quality numbers? And I think there's this endemic cultural issue. But on the kind of technology side as well, you've got kind of various systems handling various factors of the business, you know, like carrier provisioning and routing and reconciliation and billing. And, you know, to talk about centralizing those functions, I think that has to come down as a top level decision. That's got to come from the top down, that, you know, central strategy on risk management and cost reduction throughout the business, driving that, rather than coming upwards from, you know, what we often see, that either you've got a kind of a technological investment in looking for a new service, or more often than not, actually a wholesale team saying, we can't work with what we've got, we're not nimble enough, we're not versatile enough, and then talking to you, and then other areas of the business really having a resistance to change. So I think that, you know, and that's the major contributor to a do nothing approach or mentality within a business. And the only way to tackle that is a top-down approach.
Yeah, but 17 billion, 17
I know, right?
billion. That's a lot of zeros. That's a huge amount of zeros. Well, anyway, thank you, David. You were talking about about security and so on and on firewall management. So, how and what can the market learn from firewall management? And is it about the solution, or is it more about managing the firewall? What's your take on that?
Well, it's both in many ways, but I'm going to drop this one back to Neil. Neil is my firewall man. He is the expert on these things, so I'm
Cool.
going to shuffle that one over to him. He can
absolutely. Apologies for no. So Neil, please bump in.
Yeah, obviously firewalls are kind of generic term, and I think it's coined a lot in various industries. If you look back at the kind of traditional, what you would class as a firewall, you know, I think there's a lot we can learn from the evolution of that kind of technology. You know, historically, a firewall was quite a straightforward device that worked from a matrix of, you know, accept or reject policies that it drove it. And they've evolved to support kind of far more heuristic kind of threat protection based on data sets and centralized heuristics and things like that. You know, whereas telecoms has functioned primarily on that matrix of kind of if-then rules and in the operations infrastructure that's kind of limited that ability to act on a more kind of intelligent level. You know, whereas I don't think we can operate like that anymore. I mean, if you take those basic if-then conditions, then the decision making and on whether to accept or reject a call has to be very basic. And if you look at where firewalls have evolved, they have evolved to this kind of technology that we're talking about, which is where you decentralize the intelligence, you centralize the intelligence within a decentralized infrastructure. So effectively, all of your dumb devices, the edge of the network, are effectively relying on a core centralized intelligence that's working on the knowledge of the system as a whole and what threats it's seen as a whole, and then delivering those policies to all of the edge devices. And that is where modern firewall technology sits now. You know, you've got a not so dumb device, but you know, you've got a device that's sitting at the edge of the network that isn't provisioned. It's provisioned by a centralized cloud function that is deploying those policies and managing the session controls for the network as a whole. And yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Okay, so that's what the market can learn from firewall management. But so now going a bit more advanced, because you were talking about the dumb box, and what is not dumb is actually blockchain and AI. How can they help the market? I think well, obviously they're two quite frequently bandied around phrases that in emerging technologies, or not so emerging, that serve different purposes. But I think there's kind of a few kind of interesting applications on that. I mean, for blockchain, you know, for example, I mean, we know that C-band, we sat on C-band discussions for some time now, and they've been hard at work in that field to try and develop a framework for large and small operators that everyone can agree on, you know, to introduce a decentralized ledger technology into billing and reconciliation. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the focus for blockchain is at the moment. Quite where the proof of work is in that, I'm not sure. But in my opinion, I think something like that, where you're effectively reconciling at that level is too late. I mean, towards continuous reconciliation, I think, is where the market needs to look at. You know, if you're waiting for something to happen, like I said earlier, you know, waiting for billing to notice a discrepancy, then that's too late. And I think where these technologies can help is in continuous reconciliation. So you and or your partner spots that reconciliation difference before it becomes too much of an issue, and before those discrepancies get out of hand. And then I think in terms of machine learning, I think machine learning can be one of those phrases that's maybe bandied around in place of good algorithm a bit too much. I think everyone talks about machine learning and AI when they've just got really clever algorithms. I mean, but there is a place for machine learning. I mean, true machine learning, you know, and I think we've been using it in a few aspects of our technologies that rely on investments that we've made in our cloud infrastructure. So, you know, one of the benefits of effectively writing checks for many hundreds of customers is that we can invest in some very interesting technologies, certainly in the areas of column storage and analytical platforms that drive machine learning, because all machine learning needs training at the end of the day, and it's the access to by the second statistics that drives that. But I think with machine learning, it's allowed us to spot anomalies that you wouldn't notice yourself, and that's the main thing you want it to do. You know, there's some things you can input really well, there's other things you can't input. What you want a machine learning environment to do is to spot things that you can't spot yourself, and we use it not only throughout the services we give to customers, but also in the way that we plan network capacity, because, you know, we have a huge network and you've got to plan that capacity. So we use that to analyze trends and bring data in terms of things like holidays and festivals and stuff to ascertain what kind of capacity planning you need in your network, which is a great tool. And in many situations, you know, we can, especially where customers haven't necessarily enabled all the checkboxes, a lot of the time we're telling customers about things that are happening in their own networks, or carriers that, not necessarily fraudulent, but carriers that have kind of turned traffic off and they don't know, because we raise tickets with them, which I think is quite interesting. But it's obviously, fraud is one of those things that it's really good to train an algorithm in, and I think that's why so much focus has been put into machine learning and fraud detection, because obviously the threat vectors for fraud are known, but the data that, or the things that you observe in those patterns, the patterns that you're analyzing are constantly changing as new ranges are opened up, or, you know, invariably new new operators come on offering new revenue share type numbers. So it's that you've got to spot. So you've got this kind of perfect storm of really well defined algorithm and really easy to train data, you know, really good high quality training data that drives that. So I think that's why there's so much focus at the moment in fraud. But from a quality perspective, it's equally interesting, and the reason is that, you know, quality targets are very, you know, while they're relatively static, they're very big things to code up in terms of, well, to this destination we expect this ASR and this AACD, whereas to that destination we expect a completely different set of quality targets. And also you've got stuff like, you know, in a certain territory, everyone phones a taxi in the morning. So, you know, you end up with very low ACD suddenly because it's that time of day, or carriers go bad regularly at certain times of day. So for us, we found that wrapping these kind of environments into quality management has been very powerful, just in terms of saving our customers the effort of programming up those quality targets and managing those quality targets from an ongoing perspective.
Okay, thank you for this for let's say for this education to say it like this. And let's move a little bit from the technical side to, let's say, the benefit side of the story. So David, what more benefits does the wholesale market get with you guys?
I'm sorry, I was just reading chat from Yulin there. Eric, again, please.
What more benefits does the wholesale market get with you guys, actually?
Oh, well, as we were saying at the end, this technology, I mean, in many ways, it changes everything. This is why I keep using this term paradigm shift, sort of a technical term, but it changes the way we think about all aspects of the system. we're so used to working in certain parameters. The subject we were just talking about there with quality management was, I was nodding along with Neil, because that's something I've been working on recently in terms of bringing something to market that allows you to not only set quality benchmarks dynamically based upon the performances you're getting, but then constantly review those as data gets plugged back in, and then to have this machine learning technology start to flag up for you when you get these deviations from this. And once more, I want to emphasize that both improves your life as a customer of Digitalk, that you can route your calls through, but it improves the life of your customers. I've had several of our partners say that their partners are staying with them, or sometimes even coming on board with us, because they're telling them what's going on their network before they knew it, in the same way that we're telling our partners with our alerts. So this dynamic element to the whole system begins to bring into that. Now, that also plugs into efficiency. When you've got technologies allowing you to run more efficiently through, it means that in general, you require perhaps less manual intervention. And when we can bring more efficiency into the business, that's going to save money, and that's another way of increasing profitability within our system. So if we're not having to manually plug stuff in, if we've built this loop that continually just updates, gives us the reports, we can check those, they appear on our desk on a morning, automated with the set of very complicated, detailed reports that we've had out. We can look at, hey, everything's great. I can eat my muesli, drink my orange juice, and the world is a good place. I'm just going to pick up that question from Yulin.
Yeah, please, it's on reporting, huh?
Absolutely. The reporting's, I mean, basically real time. That's the point of what we're talking about, Yulin. So, I mean, within specifically our platform, we've got views of what is going on at this moment in time. You can look at active calls, the individual calls that are going through. Of course, that's part of what we're talking about. You can see failed calls that have just failed on the platform, and you can see a summary of everything that's happening. And then on your MIS, you can be plugging in within seconds to seeing what's happened in that sort of post-event world that we were talking about as well. Because of course we support that. You're still going to want to see what happens on completed calls, but we've got both aspects. You've got the real time, and you've got that traditional kind of, here's your data the second or two after it's there. You know, and the same with our provisioning. Single provisioning means that we don't have minutes of delays in updating routing. Everything is going to be there with you within seconds of the system running.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in terms of bilateral agreements, you know, they are obviously very difficult things to track, because, you know, there's multiple layers to them. You've not just got the agreement as a whole, but you're tracking individual commitments on that agreement, and it's very important to know what the fulfillment of that is. You know, you want to, so we work on live analysis and alerting. So, you know, when an agreement's looking like you're half of the way through it, but our analysis shows that, you know, it's only a third fulfilled. You know, if that's you, you've got to go and look to someone to sell, you know, to sell that to, potentially at a loss. But if it's them, you've got to be on the phone saying, hey, you know, why aren't you keeping up to your end of the bargain? And I think, you know, with agreements, it is very difficult because they change all the time. You know, most agreements are what we would call a soft agreement. You know, that it's effectively just a you know, kind of non-contractual, and it evolves through the you know, through the course of an agreement and onwards. So it's something that we keep fairly fluid, but allow to be effectively approved. So we have a kind of, you know, once an agreement is provisioned in the system, it's started to be tracked, but then you can propose changes which your manager, for example, has to approve. And once they've approved that, you then need to absorb that as if that was the agreement all along. They're very difficult things to track. And it's one of the things that we can only really do with the analytics platforms that we've got, because they can report on multiple dimensions simultaneously.
Okay. Now, everything is all about investments, and especially with margin shrinking, Neil. Where's the balance in the investments? What is the wisest path to go?
I think if a technology like this isn't saving you money right from the outset, then something's probably wrong. But I think the benefit of cloud technologies is the minimization of that upfront investment anyway. And I think, while you need to factor the costs of the personnel involved in that project, I think you're still looking at a kind of minimal investment. I think if you look purely at the savings of the technology, though, as a cost reduction, I think that's a bit blinkered, and it's how a lot of people do tend to look. It's kind of, well, we're paying this much in the license, we want to pay that much. But I think what you need to do is look at savings across the business, and what David's talked about in terms of automation and efficiency. You're talking about bums on seats at the end of the day, and how can we save on those kind of resources? And what we find we're talking to our customers is the immediate gains that they get in terms of efficiency from things like rate management. We automate rate management, automate the import of those rates, and even automate identifying things like contractual breaches, or where savings can be made when those new rates come in. You need to kind of look at those savings, the kind of across the business savings that can be achieved. Certainly, I think a lot of savings come from cloud, and that's why now more and more, kind of even at tier 1 level, the central theme is in migration to cloud technologies. To make savings across the board there in terms of how much it costs to not only own the technology, but effectively license and approve that technology and assure that technology for things like new software releases and things like that. So I think, you need to focus on the kind of the bigger picture of where the savings come from in terms of the kind of effectiveness of the workforce, as well as, the cost reductions in the technology.
Okay, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, and Neil and David, I think we're heading towards the end of this session. So before thanking my fellow panelists and then the keynote speaker, of course, and then and Digitalk as a sponsor, one last question: what does the future will bring to us? Do you have anything from your glass ball? David, Neil, bump in.
Yeah, that magic ball question. So I think in order to look to the future, you've got to look to the past, to what's gone on in the last year. And I think the last year was challenging for a lot of operators. But what we've seen, though, despite that kind of blip at the start of the pandemic, was that traffic in general is better now than it ever was. And I think the operators that survived or even thrived in that industry, I think, are the ones that pivoted and pivoted the fastest. And that's, that's about agility, to kind of, when those roaming minutes, for example, disappeared, to be able to fill that capacity with other capacity. And I think those operators that were agile and migrated to other traffic profiles and recovered were the ones that are most successful. And I think having systems that let you adapt are vital, but also be able to manage new types of risk profile in unknown territories. So I think, as we look kind of then towards the future, I think more and more people are looking at the enterprise space for at least blending some of that traffic in, and what enterprise functionality they need to meet to kind of backfill that capacity. And especially with kind of a lot of these big corporations wanting to own more and more of the home by wrapping kind of voice and telephony into it, then there's going to be quite a lot of upstream traffic consolidation. And this is bringing quality into the mix far more. You cannot look at aggregate quality anymore. You've got to focus more and more on individual quality and the individual kind of outcome of every single call, rather than just saying, well, we met your ACD, so everything's fine. So I think we're still very much excited by the wholesale market. I know there's a lot of drone about decline, but as I say, we're seeing still significant upturn in minutes throughout the pandemic. And I think as long as you can stay efficient, nimble, and remain capable to reacting to those kind of changes to commercial and regulatory requirements, there's still an excellent future in the business.
And with those words, ladies and gentlemen out there, I want to wrap it up, and I would like to thank, first of all, the keynote speaker, David Ellard. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric.
And thank you, of course, Neil, CTO of DigiTalk.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening in.
And I would like to thank the sponsor of the session, ladies and gentlemen, which is DigiTalk. And if you want to get in contact with those guys, you will find them anyway. So in the article. So thank you so much. I would like to give the floor back to Berlin. And with these words, thank you so much, and stay tuned because we have so much more to bring to you. Thank you very much, Neil and David. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Ciao for now.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Eric. Dear all, we are at the end of this webinar session, and I would like to thank to our speakers and panelists for sharing their knowledge with us, and Eric for moderating this session. Also, thank you to the audience for participating and listening. This panel will be soon available to watch in the CC Media portal. We are looking forward to welcoming you at both virtual and physical events this year. Please visit our events portal for more information. If you are interested in sponsoring one of our future branded webinars, please do contact CC team. For all the updates and fresh content, follow us on social media. Also, subscribe to our Telegram news channel to receive exclusive invitations to our upcoming CC-Webinar.live sessions. Stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.